Throughout history, humans have met their end in countless ways. War, disease, old age, but sometimes, fate has a peculiar sense of humor. And today we're exploring history's most bizarre, ironic, and frankly ridiculous deaths that prove truth is stranger than fiction. Ancient Greece, 3rd century BCE. Chrysippus of Soli wasn't just any philosopher. He was one of the most influential Stoic thinkers of his time, writing over 700 treatises on logic, ethics, and physics. Stoicism emphasized emotional restraint and accepting fate with dignity. Chrysippus helped shape this philosophy that would later influence Roman emperors like Marcus Aurelius. But how did this great mind meet his end? According to the biographer Diogenes Laertius, Chrysippus encountered a donkey eating figs on his property. Amused by this sight, he instructed an old woman to give the donkey unmixed wine to wash down its meal. Upon witnessing the drunken donkey's uncoordinated attempts to continue eating, Chrysippus was allegedly seized by such uncontrollable laughter that he collapsed and died on the spot, aged 73. A Stoic philosopher, whose entire philosophy centered around maintaining composure, dying from an excess of emotion. Though some historians suggest this account may be satirical, if true, it remains one of history's most ironic deaths. Fast forward to 1601. Tycho Brahe was no ordinary astronomer. The Danish nobleman revolutionized our understanding of the cosmos decades before telescopes existed. His meticulous observations of Mars later enabled Johannes Kepler to formulate the laws of planetary motion. But Brahe was almost as famous for his eccentricities as for his scientific achievements. In October 1601, Brahe attended a banquet hosted by Baron Peter Vogt von Rosenberg in Prague. The social etiquette of the time considered it deeply insulting to leave the table before the host, so when nature called, the 54-year-old astronomer reportedly refused to excuse himself. He continued drinking instead. Upon returning home, Brahe was unable to urinate. For 11 excruciating days, he suffered before finally dying from what was likely a burst bladder leading to kidney failure. It's 455 BCE in Sicily. Aeschylus, the playwright who revolutionized theater by introducing a second actor on stage, is enjoying his elder years under the Mediterranean sun. Then, in a twist worthy of his own tragedies, an eagle soaring overhead mistakes his bald head for a rock and drops a tortoise directly onto it, killing him instantly. Yes, you heard correctly. Eagles are known to crack open tortoises by dropping them onto rocks. One confused bird supposedly ended the life of Western theater's founding father. Before this bizarre ending, Aeschylus had written about 90 plays exploring justice, fate, and divine punishment. He was also a war hero who fought at the Battle of Marathon against the Persians. Is the tortoise tale true? We'll never know for certain, but there's a poetic irony to it. The man who wrote about the unpredictable hand of fate died by one of history's most unexpected accidents. For a playwright whose work often featured the gods toying with human lives. Athens, circa 620 BCE. Draco was the first recorded legislator of Athens, famous for his harsh legal code, so severe that we still use the term draconian today to describe extremely harsh laws. Under Draco's code, even minor offenses like stealing a cabbage could be punishable by death. When asked why he prescribed death for most crimes, he allegedly replied that small offenses deserved death, and he could find no greater punishment for serious ones. Ironically, this stern lawmaker met his end through an excess of admiration. While giving a speech at the theater on the island of Aegina, the audience was so moved that they showed their appreciation in traditional Greek fashion by throwing their cloaks, hats, and shirts onto the speaker. Unfortunately for Draco, his speech was apparently very well received. So many items were thrown that they formed a huge pile, under which he suffocated to death. It's unclear whether this story is entirely factual, but if true, it represents perhaps the only case in history of someone being literally loved to death by their fans, a politician killed by overwhelming support. Stockholm, February 12, 1771. King Adolf Frederick of Sweden was not known for military conquests or political achievements. In fact, he's predominantly remembered for one thing: his appetite. During his 20-year reign, Sweden's parliament had reduced the monarchy to a largely ceremonial role. Perhaps frustrated by his lack of political power, Adolf Frederick turned to one of the few pleasures still fully under his control: food. On that fateful Tuesday, the king sat down to his last meal, and what a meal it was. He began with lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, and smoked herring. He washed it down with champagne. But the coup de grace came in the form of his favorite dessert, semla. Semla is a traditional Swedish pastry, a sweet bun filled with almond paste and whipped cream. Normally enjoyed on special occasions, The king decided that Tuesday was special enough to justify 14 servings. Hours later, the 60-year-old monarch died from severe digestive complications. In Swedish history, he's now known as the king who ate himself to death. New York City, June 7, 1971. The Dick Cavett Show was recording an episode with an unusual guest, Jerome Irving Rodale, the 72-year-old pioneer of organic farming and health food publishing. Rodale was decades ahead of his time in advocating for organic gardening and natural health. His company's magazines, including Prevention and Organic Gardening, promoted healthy living long before it became mainstream. During the interview, Rodale was in high spirits, boasting about his excellent health. He declared, "I'm going to live to 100, unless I'm run down by a sugar-crazed taxi driver." After his segment ended, Rodale remained seated while the next guest was being interviewed. Suddenly, he made a snoring sound. Cavett initially thought Rodale was making a joke about the conversation. He wasn't joking. Rodale had suffered a heart attack and died on the spot, minutes after predicting his longevity. The episode never aired. In his 1974 autobiography, Cavett recalled asking his producer, "Talk about your bad luck. How many people do you suppose died on the show?" The producer replied, "I know of only one, Rodale." A health guru dying immediately after boasting about his longevity made Rodale's death a cautionary tale about tempting fate with bold predictions. London, 1626. Francis Bacon, philosopher, scientist, statesman, and pioneer of the scientific method, was traveling through snowy weather when inspiration struck. Bacon had been contemplating the preservation of food through cold, what we now know as refrigeration. Before refrigerators existed, this was cutting-edge science. According to the account of his friend Sir William Raleigh, Bacon stopped his carriage near Highgate and purchased a chicken from a poor woman. He then went outside in the freezing weather to stuff the chicken with snow. The 65-year-old Bacon was so absorbed in his impromptu experiment that he didn't notice the toll the cold was taking on his body. He soon fell ill with pneumonia. In a letter written during his final illness, Bacon noted with satisfaction that his experiment succeeded excellently well. Unfortunately, he wouldn't live to develop his discovery further. He died several days later. In a strange twist of fate, the intellectual who championed the advancement of learning through observation and experimentation became a victim of his own scientific curiosity. His experiment did prove correct. Cold does preserve meat, but the price of this verification was his life. The Orkney Islands, 892 CE. Sigurd Eysteinsson, also known as Sigurd the Mighty, was the second Earl of Orkney and a fearsome Viking warrior. Sigurd had been engaged in a bitter territorial dispute with a Scottish chieftain named Maelbrigte the Bucktoothed, so called because of his prominent front teeth. Sigurd challenged Maelbrigte to a 40-man-per-side battle, but in true Viking fashion, he cheated, bringing 80 men instead. The Scots were slaughtered, and Sigurd personally beheaded Maelbrigte. To celebrate his victory, Sigurd tied the heads of his defeated enemies to his horses' saddles. As he rode triumphantly home, something unusual happened. Maelbrigte's prominent tooth scratched Sigurd's leg as he rode. The seemingly minor wound became infected. The infection spread rapidly. Within days, Sigurd the Mighty was dead, killed by the very man he had defeated. It's perhaps the only recorded instance in history of a dead man getting revenge on his killer. Even in death, Maelbrigte had the last laugh, or perhaps more accurately, the last bite. Hungary, 1063. King Bela I had seized the throne from his nephew after a tumultuous period in Hungarian history. Bela was actually quite a capable ruler. He introduced currency reforms, regulated prices, and organized the kingdom's administration. However, his promising 3-year reign came to an abrupt and bizarre end. While conducting official business in his palace at Demos, the wooden throne upon which he sat suddenly collapsed beneath him. The injuries he sustained from this accident proved fatal. He died soon after, aged around 45. In a time when royal authority was seen as divinely ordained, a king literally having his throne collapse beneath him was rich with symbolic meaning. His death, at the moment of his greatest political stability, provided a stark reminder of fortune's fickle nature. As they say, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, especially when the throne beneath it isn't structurally sound. Austria, 1567. Hans Steininger was the burgomaster, mayor of the town, but he was better known for one distinctive feature: his beard. Steininger's beard measured an astonishing 4.5 feet, nearly 1.4 meters, long. In an age when impressive facial hair was considered a sign of virility and status, his beard was legendary. One fateful day, a fire broke out in the town. As citizens rushed about in panic, Steininger prepared to join the firefighting efforts. Normally, he kept his massive beard rolled up and tucked in a leather pouch, but in his haste to respond to the emergency, he left it unrolled. As he hurried down the stairs of his home, he stepped on his own beard, lost his balance, and fell, breaking his neck. Today, you can still visit his memorial in Braunau, which includes a portrayal of his famous beard. The town museum even claims to house a portion of the deadly facial hair. Lebanon, Ohio, 1871. Clement Vallandigham was a skilled lawyer and former congressman with a flair for dramatic courtroom demonstrations. He was defending Thomas McGeehan, who was accused of shooting a man named Tom Myers during a barroom brawl. Vallandigham's defense strategy proved that Myers could have accidentally shot himself while drawing his pistol from his pocket. The night before delivering his argument, Vallandigham was in his hotel room practicing his demonstration. He believed the victim's pistol had accidentally discharged while being withdrawn from a pocket. Vallandigham had two pistols. One he knew was unloaded for his demonstration, and another he didn't realize was loaded. In a fatal mix-up, he picked up the wrong gun. As he enacted how Myers might have shot himself, Vallandigham accidentally shot himself in the abdomen, proving his defense theory all too effectively. Before dying the next day, he requested that the demonstration be entered into evidence. His legal partner used the incident in his closing argument, declaring, "If Vallandigham's fatal accident doesn't convince you, gentlemen of the jury, nothing will." The jury acquitted his client. Vallandigham had literally given his life to win his case, perhaps the most convincing closing argument in legal history, and certainly one of the most ironic deaths ever recorded. These bizarre deaths span nearly 2,500 years of human history, yet they share a common thread. Each reminds us of life's unpredictability and sometimes bizarre sense of irony. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through mortality's stranger side, please like, subscribe, and share. And remember, no matter how you go, try to make it a good story.